There is a prescription your doctor cannot write. It has no patent. No pharmaceutical company profits from it, and your city has been quietly removing access to it. For 70 years. Your eyes are fluent in a language. Your city has stopped speaking. For roughly 300,000 years, the human visual system evolved inside one specific environment. Coastlines that repeated their patterns at every scale, clouds that folded into smaller clouds, tree branches that split into smaller branches, that split into smaller branches still. Mathematicians call this kind of repeating pattern a fractal, a shape that looks similar at every level of magnification. The way a coastline looks like a coastline, whether you are viewing it from a plane or crouching down at the water's edge. And your brain doesn't just enjoy these patterns, it runs on them. Dr. Richard Taylor at the University of Oregon spent years measuring what happens when human subjects view natural fractal patterns versus the flat geometry of modern cities. Straight lines, right angles, glass towers, concrete plazas, shapes your brain has never, in 300,000 years, learned to rest inside. He measured stress using skin conductance and found that exposure to mid-complexity natural fractals produced a 60% reduction in physiological stress compared to viewing the flat geometry of cities. Not a preference, not a mood. A measurable 60% drop in the body's stress response, triggered simply by looking at the right kind of shape. And the city you live in was built almost entirely out of the wrong ones. In 2015, a research team at the University of Melbourne ran a deceptively simple experiment. They took 150 students and gave them a tedious attention task, pressing a key every time a number flashed on a screen, unless that number was 3, in which case they had to stop themselves. Not a hard task, but a draining one, the kind of low-grade mental exhaustion that describes most of a working day. Midway through the task, they gave each student a 40-second break. Half the students looked out at a concrete rooftop. The other half looked at a flowering green roof. Low-growing plants, a modest meadow. Nothing dramatic, just green. The students who looked at the concrete came back more depleted than when they left. More errors, less focus. The break had made them worse. The students who looked at the green roof came back measurably sharper. Significantly fewer errors, better sustained attention, after 40 seconds. Not 40 minutes in a forest, not a weekend retreat. 40 seconds of looking at a modest flowering roof produced a measurable cognitive restoration that the concrete specifically blocked. Rachel and Stephen Kaplan called this mechanism attention restoration theory. The idea is this: navigating a city demands what they call directed attention. Avoiding traffic, reading signs, filtering noise, making decisions every 30 seconds. That kind of attention is an exhaustible resource. It runs out. And nature, specifically the kind of nature that holds your gaze without demanding it, a flickering leaf, moving water, the branching of a tree against the sky, restores that resource, while you are barely aware it is happening. They called this quality soft fascination. The difference between a screen that demands you engage and a pattern your brain processes almost involuntarily, almost effortlessly, the way it was designed to. Your city was not built for soft fascination. It was built for hard transaction, and your nervous system is running that deficit every single working day. In 1984, a researcher named Roger Ulrich published a paper in Science magazine that should have changed everything, and mostly didn't. He had spent years studying patients recovering from surgery in a hospital in Pennsylvania. The patients were in identical rooms, same nursing care, same medications, same procedures. One difference only. Some rooms had a window facing a small stand of trees. Others had a window facing a brick wall. What Ulrich found was not a small effect. Patients with the tree view had shorter hospital stays. They required significantly fewer painkillers. And their nursing notes were different. The nurses wrote things like, upset and crying, needs much encouragement, about the patients facing the wall. For the patients facing the trees, they wrote, in good spirits, moving well. The same procedure, the same ward, the same nurses, writing entirely different words, because one window faced a tree, and one faced a brick wall. The brick wall was not neutral. It was an active stressor, one that slowed recovery, increased pain, and changed what the nurses believed about their patients. That was 1984, 40 years ago, and we are still building hospitals with windows facing concrete, offices with no view at all, apartments where the only thing visible through the glass is the glass surface of the building opposite. Not because the evidence isn't there, but because the evidence is inconvenient for the way we build. In 2021, a forester named Cecil Konynendijk introduced something called the 3-3300 rule. 3 trees visible from your home, your workplace, or your school. 30% canopy cover in your neighborhood, meaning 3 in every 10 square meters overhead, should be leaves. And 300 meters to a high-quality green space, at least half a hectare in size. A 5-minute walk to somewhere that breathes. These are not luxury specifications. They are biological minimums, the lowest threshold at which the research suggests the human nervous system receives adequate restorative input from the natural environment it evolved inside. And most cities fail all 3. Not some cities. Most cities. Think about what that means for a moment. The biological minimum, the lowest possible acceptable dose of nature, and most cities cannot meet it. The glass towers that went up in your downtown displaced the green spaces that sat on that land. The infill development between buildings removed the trees that lined those streets. The car infrastructure that carved through neighborhoods cut people off from parks they used to walk to. And somewhere in a city right now, there is a person sitting at a desk whose window faces a wall, who has not walked past a tree in 4 days. And they cannot tell you why they feel so flat. They think it is the workload, or the news, or just getting older. They do not know they are running a biological deficit, because nobody told them that nature is not a luxury. It is a dose, and they are not getting it. We have spent decades debating solar panels, carbon offsets, electric vehicles, emission targets, as though the only crisis was the one happening to the planet. But there is also a crisis happening to the person, standing in the concrete canyon, looking up at the glass tower, their nervous system running a stress response that never quite switches off, because the shapes around them are shapes their brain has never, in 300,000 years of evolution, learned to rest inside. You don't need a vacation. You need a fractal. 3 trees from your window, 30% canopy overhead, 300 meters to somewhere green. That is not a luxury. That is a biological right. And it is time we started demanding it from the people who build our cities.